Welcome to the Life After Sugar podcast, the podcast that's not just about sugar, but about your relationship with it and also with food and especially with yourself. So if you want to discover your life after sugar and hear inspiring stories from all kinds of people who also cut out sugar in their way, at their pace, for their own reasons, this is the podcast for you. Because when you take away the sugar, you can finally discover the real sweetness in your life. I'm your host, Netta Gorman. And in this week's episode, I'm talking with Laurie, who lost 100 pounds when she cut sugar and switched to a more whole foods diet, including more protein and more fats. Laurie is a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner now, and at 61 years old, she says she feels better than when she was in her 20s. We'll get to our chat about how Laurie lost weight and regained her health in just a minute. But first, I just wanted to tell you that if you're looking for some free resources, then I have plenty for you. First, download my 5 tips to get rid of cravings. And those 5 tips may not be what you think they are. So go to aftersugarclub.com and download your 5 tips today. Come check out the Life After Sugar Facebook page and subscribe to the Life After Sugar YouTube channel, as well as my Instagram account at My Life After Sugar, which is where you'll get all kinds of inspiration so that you can see that it's perfectly possible to live a happy and active life, even if you don't eat sugar. You can also check out my TikTok account at Netta_lifeaftersugar. All right, time for my chat with Laurie. All right, so today I'm talking with Laurie. Laurie, can you tell us a bit about your background with sugar when you were growing up?
Well, sugar, when I was growing up, it was the ice cream addiction. I'm like, my poor mom, she did the best she could. She gave us $5 of allowance each week. We were like rich. And we turned around and spent that on candy, ice cream, and everything. And I'm like, she probably should have kept it in her pocket because we definitely didn't need all that stuff. But I remember my brothers asking me, if you go get the ice cream, I'll give you a bowl, So I'd get on my bike and I'd go to the dairy, which was, maybe half a mile down the street or a mile, and then we'd eat ice cream. So it was always ice cream. We'd get cookies and we'd go to the store. There was this store that, we would buy candy. I mean, that was just what we did. We had $5 to spend. It was spent on sugar.
When was this? How old were you, or what decade was this?
It had to have been in the 70s. I was born in 62. So basically, by the time I was 10, I'm sure I was on my bike going out to get my addiction food. So, but, in the 70s.
Did you consider that was normal? Were all the other kids doing that?
I'm not sure if the other kids were doing that. I'm pretty sure they were. We actually had something that was really fun at the time. I mean, it's kind of hilarious now, but we had a donut truck drive by all the time. We would get fresh donuts off the back of this truck. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. But, but I think, it seemed normal to go out to the store and get candy. I mean, it was the Butterfinger at the time was my favorite, anything crunchy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I remember my mom would bring home animal crackers and, the frosted animal crackers, and she would split them and we would eat them. So I don't know if, I didn't hide my food. We ate it, as best we could. I don't remember hiding it or anything. I didn't know it was a sugar addiction. It just figures there was stuff you did. You had $5, you spend it on sweets.
Yeah, that's a lot of allowance for the 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I was one of 7 children, and I was the only one that got overweight. And then that overweight was depression too. And so that's the way my body dealt with it. So I had to deal with being obese at a young age and then having debilitating depression, which caused me to be more of a loner. Plus I don't know if that turned me into an introvert or I was just natural introvert. I don't know, but I just ended up being a loner because I was overweight and uncomfortable in my body. And back then I really don't know what the dates are or the ages were, but by the time I got to high school, I think I was down to 150 pounds. But at one point, I actually got up to 200 pounds with all the foods that I was eating that I was sensitive to. And then my mom put me on Atkins, and that did help. I remember eating protein bread, and that's all I remember. And I must have lost the weight because I got down to 150. But, that was you bake. I baked. I was a baker. My grandmother was a baker. So I would make this special banana bread or pineapple bread, and I would bake cells, So that was something I loved to do. I love baking, but that was
Yeah.
probably because I wanted my sugar. So I don't know if that's why I picked it up.
Yeah, yeah, so makes sense. And what was
Yeah.
it about the Atkins diet that helped you lose weight? Do you know?
Well, one of the things that my mom said was that I do really well with amino acids. And so that must have really turned my brain back on. Probably, I must have cut out the sugar. I wouldn't have lost the weight. So I must have done what she asked me to do. And I must have increased my protein. And even now, the more I study it and the more I understand it, is I do really well on red meat. I don't do good on fish. I could do salmon because it's got the higher fat. And I don't gravitate towards chicken, but what fills me up and makes me feel good is red meat. And from all of I'm studying, it's the amino acids. And I take extra amino acids. And for the first time in my life, I'm building muscle at
Hmm.
60, and I'm actually have more hair than I used to have. It's longer than it normally is. And normally I'll trim it because it's really, skinny. But I feel really good on amino acids, and I have no desire to eat sugar at all. I've been off sugar for, I'd say, probably 8 years.
Wow.
And once I got off sugar, my brain cleared and I just got excited about life, and I felt better than I've ever felt, because once you've had depression and that cloud lifts, you don't ever want to go back to the
Yep.
foods that caused that before, because you feel so much better. And so one of the things that happened was I only lost 20 pounds. For like 3 years, I was stalled. So I had a plateau. So I'm always telling people it's okay if you have a plateau, you're not gaining weight. That's important. There's so many things that our body has to do that it doesn't really matter if we're on a plateau, as long as we're getting healthy and we're eating a diet that's healthy for our body. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I've never wanted to eat um, sugar again, because every time I would have even just honey or too much fruit, I could feel the cravings coming back.
Okay.
And then I would feel the brain fog coming in, even with honey.
Yeah. I
And
was going to ask, when you say sugar, what exactly do you mean for you?
well, sugar for me specifically means any sweets that are made with processed sugars. But I might make a keto dessert with like a low carb sweetener with almond flour, but I don't do it as often as I used to do. But basically, like right now, I'm kind of having, 61. I'm dealing with hormones, and I'm dealing with balancing my cortisol and adrenal levels, and I'm also going through a metal detox. So I'm feeling a little tired and sluggish, and a lot of people will reach for sugar.
Yeah.
But for me, I have no desire to reach for sugar, because to me, it's a toxic food that I don't want to eat. So the more you understand what sugar does to the body, the less you want to eat it. And I consider wheat the same thing. So wheat and grains that turn into sugar in your blood are all what a lot of people refer to as sugar in the blood. So sugar in your body is a glucose load on the body. And that is all the processed grains, the sugars, the honey, the fruit, anything that breaks down to glucose in a large amount is going to be too much sugar in the body. And so that can throw your body off. But so what I do if I feel like I need a little something extra is, I have keto granola that I don't normally eat. And I just wanted a little extra carbohydrate just to help boost whatever insulin. I want my insulin level to just function just right, so that my brain is working and getting the glucose to function that's in my brain. Because without insulin, we don't get that glucose to function in the brain as readily. And that could be another problem. So there's a bit of a balance sometimes that we need to do. And everybody's going to be in a different spot where they need the right amount of sugar for their body,
Yeah.
and or the right amount of carbohydrates. So mostly carbohydrates are non-essential. Our body can make all the glucose it wants from protein. And so what we need is amino acids. So if our amino acids are too low, we're actually in a starvation mode. We're not getting nutrients. We're not going to be able to get our brain to function. We won't be able to build muscle, and we won't be able to have bones. And so you don't want butter bones when you're 70 and you're standing in the kitchen and all of a sudden you fall down and break a bone. That is what's the lack of protein that women don't realize. They're not getting enough protein. And so it has to be, basically Give yourself the protein and then fine tune what your body needs. Don't ever go to a toxic food, but what could you eat that's going to help your brain feel good? If you're in the moment and there's stress, if we all have to deal with stress, how do
Mm.
we balance our stress? Let's not reach for a sugary, processed, ultra processed food that's going to cause us to have more cravings, go back to being sick, going back to having a disease in the body, because that's what it does. It turns on if you turn your sugar switch on, you're turning your disease switch on, and we don't want to go there. And I've turned mine off, and I'm fully aware of that. And so the clients that I work with, they always like, God, I'm never going to eat that crap again. They feel so much better, and they understand what's happening in their body, that once you get to that point, there's no going back. It's like, the light bulb's gone off in your head, and you know that those foods are not going to work for your body. And there's so many other things you could eat that make you feel good.
Well, yeah. And I think one of the challenges that a lot of people who identify as sugar addicts have is they know this intellectually. But it's the doing of the thing, of the
Mhm.
cutting sugar, that is the challenge. It's like, yeah, yeah, I've read all the books, I've listened to all the podcasts, including this one. I know all the info, and yet I still end up eating sugar when I'm stressed or tired or emotional, whatever. So, how did you actually change that intellectual knowledge into action?
Well, one of the things that I did was, first of all, hanging out with like-minded people who are on the same journey that you're on is huge. And the other thing is, you may not be getting enough fat. If you're not getting enough fat and amino acids, your body is starving. And if you're starving, your sugar switch could be turned on and you will crave more food. As long as those cravings are turned on, you will reach for them. You don't really have a choice. Don't beat yourself up if you can't say no. What's happening is a hormonal process. If you do not eat enough fat and protein, you will crave those foods. So what I did was I was on more of the bulletproof diet, which is a full-on keto diet when I started. So I did the bulletproof coffee. I made sure I had the butter and the MCT oil that turned my brain on, that helped turn off my cravings. So I usually have all of my clients do that to start to get off the processed food, because we need to have 30 grams of protein minimally. 30 to 50 grams of protein is the amount that we need per meal
And
to
that is
actually.
more than
Mhm.
that 30 grams of protein, that is more than, say, 30 grams of steak, right? So
So
you
so when
more,
you look at, I usually just Google it. It could be like 5 to 6 ounces of a protein source could be 30 grams of protein. But if it's fish, it may not be the right amount of protein. If you're more of a protein-based diet body type, you're going to need more red meats. If you're not, then you could get by and feel comfortable with white fish. But I don't feel comfortable with white fish because there's not enough tryptophan. And so if you need more tryptophan for neurotransmitters, you're going to need to eat more of the red meat. And that's what I reach for. And then that's the other thing. So if you're having those cravings and you can't turn them off, having some glutamine in the afternoon is going to turn off your cravings. You might need to bring in L-theanine, 5-HTP. You've got to balance your neurotransmitters. If you're not getting protein, you're not creating neurotransmitters.
all
And
right,
so
well,
if
hang
you're
on.
eating for fatigue, you need the neurotransmitters.
Well, the thing is, yes, the thing is, for most of us, what you just said is a little bit confusing in the sense that we don't see food in terms of all those impressive words you just used. So how do people know what to eat? Because as far as I've read, also, it depends for the protein, it depends on its bioavailability and how the
Right.
body can metabolize the protein. And so correct me if I'm wrong, but I've read that animal-based proteins are more bioavailable than
Yes.
plant-based
Yes.
proteins. And
Correct.
yet we are told to reduce how much meat we eat and to increase plant-based proteins or just plants in general. So how does the general public, the regular consumer, know what to eat?
Yeah, that's very hard to actually perhaps understand, because the medical system and the government is trying to push a plant-based agenda. Well, if you look at all the studies, the plant-based agenda does not get us enough protein for us to have better brain health and for us to have our body so that it actually functions. If you're eating plant-based protein, you may be absorbing 18% of that protein. If you're eating eggs with the egg yolk, you're going to absorb 48% of that protein. But if you take the egg yolk out, you're down to again, maybe 18 to 20% of that absorption factor. If you're just eating egg whites, we need to have the fat to absorb it. And so when you're also, so eggs are the highest bioavailable protein that we have. If you take them out, you're going to lose a lot of nutrients. And if you're not getting nutrients from the fat and that protein, your body doesn't have the building blocks it needs to actually have health. And then, so red meat is going to have more bioavailability than the plant-based proteins as well. But then the other side of this too, which is where I come in as a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, is really running diagnostic labs and finding out what's wrong with your body. Is your digestion functioning? If you're eating good food and not digesting it, it may not. You may be having detoxification problems. And so we can look inside the body and find out what's going on. And so most people have digestive dysfunction. And so if you can't break the protein down because you have low stomach acid, because you stopped eating fat, you stopped eating protein, then the body's like, well, we're not going to waste this. We're not going to overwork ourselves and waste all this process. And then you may end up with gallbladder dysfunction because you have cholestasis, you're having a stalled gallbladder function.
Yeah.
So all of those things happen when we don't use the body we're designed to eat. And so when you study this more, and I like the book by Gary Taubes is a good one to follow because he talks about why we get fat. And then I love the book by The Wheat Belly by Dr.
Yes.
Yeah, The Wheat Belly by Dr. William Davis, because he's a cardiologist and he'll tell you flat out that gluten is a toxin to your body and that it can cause you to have a heart problem. And then there is, you could follow Chris Kresser. If you read the books of the people who are studying ancestral nutrition, it's going to start making more sense to you. You can't listen to what the government says because what they're doing is it's a for-profit system. It's not about anything that they've been able to prove per studies, because they just put out a study on mice that said that if you eat a keto diet, you're going to have organ discomfort or organ breakdown. Well, guess what fat they used? They used mostly fat for mice that don't eat fat. And it was like a 95% fat. And they used Crisco, which is a trans fat, a shortening that damages everybody. Sure, if you eat, that's going to get sick. But that's a false study. That's not a study, but the headlines are alarming. So those are the things
it's
that are happening.
clickbait, a lot of clickbait going on. And also, as consumers and again, regular citizens, we're not all very well up on methodology of all these studies. And so
It's
we want to see the headlines and not necessarily go behind and look at the methodology and the type of double blind. Is it a double blind scientific study? Is it done on rodents? Is it done on humans? Which it hardly ever is because of ethical concerns. Yeah, so it's really difficult as consumers still to know, A, what do I eat? Because everything seems to contradict each other, and B, how do I go from the knowledge to action?
Right. And so that's where if we eat more protein and get more amino acids, we could flip off the sugar switch cravings and then actually reduce our risk for prediabetes, because that's the same process. When we flip the sugar switch off, we don't have the cravings, we flip our disease switch off. That's what we do for our body, because I used to have asthma, prediabetes, depression, and all that. So I no longer have any conditions. And at 61 with no medication. So this is naturally how we're supposed to be if we eat the protein. So to get off the sugar, you might need to bring in the neurotransmitter. So there's a good book out there called Cravings. I forgot the author's name, but it's a Black book that has Stop Cravings. That one's really good. But there's a documentary out there by Vinnie Tortridge, Fat 1 and Fat 2.
Yes.
And he's coming out with one that's Dirty Keto. So he's a good one to follow too, because if you get that information and understand what's going on, then it's easier to apply it. And maybe, in the beginning, it can be hard. Like I've got the conviction and the certainty. And with my clients, I give them the accountability and we get together weekly. So if you have somebody you're working with, like yourself or me, then what that can help you do is actually get off the cravings, because it gives you accountability so that you can get into a process and actually focus on doing it. I hope that helps. I know I'm kind of like, it's hard to go back to the beginning when I was trying to do it myself, but basically I had to pull in the fat. And once I pulled in the fat, I'm able to turn off my cravings.
And when you say fat, what types of foods do you mean?
So coconut oil, I did a lot of MCT oil, a lot of butter. Now I know I'm sensitive to butter, so I do ghee, but I did do butter at the time. And I did a lot of coconut oil and coconut milk back in the day. when I first started, and I still do some. And then it's animal fats, because animal fats don't cause inflammation in the body. The vegetable seed oils do. And so what happens with our body if we're concerned about cholesterol by increasing your fat is you got to remember your body will make 80% of the cholesterol if you do not eat it. So it doesn't matter if you eat it. But when you do eat it, you create HDL, which actually manages the LDL and turns them into light, fluffy LDL. That's what we want. We
Now,
want to eat it.
I get this, but it can sound a bit technical for a lot of people. And it sounds like the complete opposite of what we're told. I want to take a quick break to say that if this is your first time here, then welcome and thank you for listening to this podcast. And whether you're new or a regular and you haven't yet rated or reviewed this podcast, could I ask you to scroll down and tap on the stars to rate this podcast and also to write a short review to let me know how this podcast is helping you in your life after sugar. I love reading your reviews, and when you rate and review this podcast, not only does it encourage me to continue making new episodes, but it also helps to share this podcast and have more people see it so that we can help more people feel better and lose weight with less sugar. So again, thank you for rating and reviewing this podcast and for spreading the word about sugar.
It is, and that's what you need to do. Flip the food plate upside down or that pyramid upside down and eat the other direction, correct?
And that's easier said than done, because you have people in white coats, right, are telling you, eat this, not that. And then you come along or I come along and say, no, flip it on its head. I'm sorry, but that is cognitive dissonance for the person. They're like, but I can't go against what my doctor tells me to do.
Right.
They've studied this. In fact, they haven't studied nutrition that much.
No. But that's the thing that I like to do. I like to follow doctors who are doing the opposite. So if anybody who's listening to this needs a resource about a doctor that's doing more low carb for their patients and getting results, just DM me and I'll send you some resources, because that's part of it, is trying to understand this and to understand that it was normal for us to have cholesterol of 345. That was normal. And even though it sounds alarming today because they're trying to put it too low, if we go too low with our cholesterol, we actually don't have fat for our brain to function. We don't have fat for our hormones to function, and we won't feel good and have energy. And so it is necessary, but we just need to, like you said, the information needs to trickle down. And there are a lot of doctors, even Dr. Berg has been kind of censored, but he's got a lot of good information out there and to follow. And I followed Dave Asprey for the longest time, and he saved my life because I needed to make that transition. I had a sister that died of diabetes and over 400 pounds. My dad died from diabetes. So I had that the DNA, the genetic propensity, but most people do because it's against our human design to eat carbohydrates that are going to overload our blood system, turn on the insulin levels, and make the body work hard. And then if you're doing that all day long, you become insulin resistant, which then causes the problems. Because if you follow Dr. Ben Bickman too, he's on Instagram and he's got YouTube stations, but he talks about all the studies. You could, simple, easy studies to look at. Dr. Ben Bickman will have some really good information out there. So I follow all the doctors and I keep abreast of all of this, all of that information. And it's empowering when we do that. But just know that if you don't feel good doing the same thing, even I know, and like you were saying, people know they need to change. But one of the things we could do is just get rid of the processed food and go down to fruit, get your carbs under 100 and see how you feel.
Yeah. Under 100 grams a day, you mean?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Do you have a doctor?
No, I don't have medical insurance, no doctor. I just take care of myself at home. And, and that's what Dr. William Davis said. He has a book out called Undoctored, and he says, take care of yourself at home. Do not go to the doctor. He's always saying, if your doctor tells you this, fire that doctor. I just love him.
Well, that's a very American
Renegade
concept.
Health or something.
Yeah, very American concept to fire your doctor, especially as a Canadian, I can tell you. We have trouble finding a doctor, and once you get one, you hang on to them.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not always possible in other countries to A, find a doctor and B, fire them, you
Well,
know.
yeah, and people, that we get stuck in the medical system here where doctors are about old school nutrition, which isn't nutrition. So yeah, you just really have to kind of take care of yourself and research what you need to do for your body. It's like, why do you feel the way you feel? And how do you want to feel? And maybe, working with a coach for 3 months just to get that understanding under control would be a huge investment in your health
Yeah,
because we need to be with like-minded people. Even to this day, I have mentors and other people I follow to stay abreast of all the information and to know that, everything I'm doing feels right and is right for my body. And so
yeah.
I just keep studying.
Yeah, yes. And as I say, I know that it's really difficult for a lot of people to have this attitude that you and I may have of, hey, I'm going to educate myself, I'm going to make my own decisions, especially in a field like nutrition slash medical fields that we have no background in, or I certainly don't.
Yeah, yeah. So I wonder, I think if you look back at the simplicity of this, is there was people were not overweight in the 50s. They had 3 square meals a day without snacks. They still had carbohydrates, but they had real food. So what happened was we lost the protection of protein and good fats. When they took those away from us, we started getting fat. And so if you want to just look back at how people ate in the 1900s, your great great grandparents, that's how we should eat as a species because that unless it was a starvation period, we don't want to go to a starvation period because a lot of the studies were done during starvation. We want to just look back at when our ancestors were thriving, what were they eating, what was their natural diet, and we want to look back on that. I mean, like if your ancestors were, or if you're Indian and you were from India, they're more vegetarian, but what were they eating? What protected them with the buffalo milk and butter? When they took that away and brought in more sugar and more vegetable oils, now they have diabetes. And so the same thing with Americans is we started using more sugar, more vegetable oils, took away the protein and the fat, and now we have diabetes and we have an obesity problem. We need to go back to 3 square meals a day. That's where you want to start. Eat your protein and your fat and your vegetables. Have some fruit, nuts, seeds, avocados, and olives. These foods will help you thrive and will keep you from craving the sugars.
I'm reading this book at the moment.
Ultra processed people. Oh, I have to check that one out.
Yes, by Chris Van Telken. It's incredible, and it's not the first book I've read about this subject, but it's incredible what passes for food in our
Mhm.
Western society these days.
Yeah. And Dr. Lufkin, he has his new book out, The Lies I Taught in Medical School.
Yes.
And he talks about the ultra processed foods. And he's got the book out called Metabolical too, that's
Mhm.
really good. And he said he couldn't even write that book till he left medicine because of it's being so contrary to everything else. But, he used to work with children and he says this is what's causing children to be sick. If they're drinking juice and having soda, if nothing else, don't drink your calories as liquid. And I can't even do, or one of the things that helped me lose weight even more was to take out all the protein shakes and to take out the whey because those are insulinic. They don't give you the right type of protein for your body. If you're sensitive to dairy, then those are going to cause you to hold on to inflammation and make you more tired and think you need to overeat.
Yes, because you've been talking about proteins, and I wanted to ask you about protein bars, protein shakes, because I don't expect anyone to think the way I do, but my sort of I wonder how come people think protein comes in vanilla or chocolate flavors, you know? Because the diet industry has us believing that these shakes and bars are protein. What's your take on it?
It's not the right amount of protein. Remember I was saying, I always suggest that people use perfect aminos because that is 100% absorbable protein versus if you're doing a plant-based protein and spending $50 on a jug of protein, you're only absorbing 18% of that. And so it's not enough protein to actually maybe build muscle. It's not the right amount of protein to actually that your body needs to build or synthesize muscle. Like I was saying, once I gave up the shakes and gave up all the bars and then switched to perfect aminos, I am building muscles. I'm like, I got muscles in my arms now. It's like I've got great definition. And I'm really proud of that. And my hair is growing. And the only thing that I changed that's different is I increased my protein from animal protein and increased the perfect aminos. And that makes a big difference. But in the beginning, when you're transitioning from standard processed food, use the bars because if you need that as a crutch, get off the processed food, use the food bridges, use the bars, but bring in the protein. So use the bars as a dessert, but not as a protein replacement. I would just use them as dessert, or when you're really just stressed out and you need a little something. I used to use the bulletproof bars. I use collagen, saved me too. Collagen helps my brain work better. And so when you do those things that are going to help your brain function, you're going to feel better. So if you have to have the food bridges to get off the processed food, then use them. But eventually, it's not about eating only those. It's about also having protein meals and getting your vegetables because you need to detox. There's detoxification problems and there's digestive issues. And so you might need a digestive enzyme. Most people do.
I did. Yes, I definitely
Yeah.
did. I
Yeah.
needed HCl plus the
Yeah.
three digestive enzymes for
Mhm.
proteins and and fats and carbs. And so, what is perfect aminos? Can you just tell us?
Yeah, Perfect Aminos is a brand, and the reason I like it is because it's got a doctor behind it, but it's also been showing it. They give really good articles out there to explain how it works in the body. But basically, what it does, if I take I'll take 5 for breakfast instead of fasting, it doesn't raise my insulin levels, and I can still fast a little longer. But it gives me 30 grams of protein for muscle synthesis, but it also gives me the amino acids for helping me build neurotransmitters. And so this protein is 100% absorbable on an empty stomach. You cannot get that from a protein powder. On a vegetarian protein powder, that's only 18% absorbable. And so if you do not get the right amount of protein, we can't build muscle. And if you don't build muscle, then you're always going to struggle with the amount of glucose you eat. So when you have more muscle, you can actually have more carbohydrates. So that's why men lose weight faster, have more muscle mass, and don't have to struggle so much because, well, the hormone issue too, but they have more muscle mass.
Hmm.
That's your basal metabolic rate. If we can increase muscle, we can increase our basal metabolic rate and burn more calories. And
Yes.
so then we don't have to struggle so much with trying to worry about gaining a pound every time we eat something.
Yes, crikey, that is a lot of information packed into a few minutes there. You know a lot about this stuff, and it may be slightly overwhelming for the listener.
Yeah, I try not to, but I don't know how to make it more simple.
Yeah, no, it's what I get from it, unprocessed foods, which we
Mhm.
see eye to eye on definitely. And of those unprocessed foods, more proteins, more fats, and basically no sugar. And sugar, it doesn't count as an unprocessed food, it's necessarily processed.
Right, right. I mean, there's always look at nature's sugar, fruit. That fruit was designed to raise our insulin levels, but it is like if you take sugar out and then you want a little something, a couple of pieces of berries is going to give you a little bit of sweetness and it makes you feel satisfied. But the thing is, you want to do that as dessert afterwards. You don't want to, because if you start with fruit in a meal, like if you do a fruit smoothie in the morning, what happens is you turn your insulin levels on first thing in the morning. So what you want to do in the morning is go back to basics. What did our grandparents eat? Bacon and eggs and sausage or meat. That was what helped them not eat for another 6 hours. But if you turn your insulin levels on with oatmeal, with fruit and yogurt that don't have any fat, then you're hungry an hour later and you're still craving things, and then you're going to reach for more sugar in your coffee, a candy bar, or whatever. And so
Mhm.
the whole goal is to how can you eat more food, turn off your sugar switch off, and not crave food.
Yeah.
So to get rid of the cravings, you'll have to eat more fat and protein.
Yes, that's the takeaway. To get rid of
Mhm.
the cravings, you have to eat more fat and
Yep.
protein. And we understand from unprocessed whole foods.
Right, right. And that's what I had to do. And it worked for me. And feeling better was what made it worth it. And then, having a goal, having something to focus on, I went back and retrained myself as the functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. And so I just got excited. I got excited. I went back, I studied the nutrition, and I started this business. And now I'm taking all of my lived experience because I used to weigh 225 pounds. I am down 100 pounds and I feel amazing. And with that, and wanting to share this message and living my purpose and my passion, I don't ever want to go back to feeling the way I'm feeling because at 61, I have more energy than I did when I was 40. I'm stronger and have more muscle. And when I celebrated my 60th birthday, it was the rim to rim Grand Canyon 24-mile hike, and
Whoa.
I loved it. And I did that at 60, and I'm just thinking I want to go back and do it again because I love it. But
Yeah.
if your body feels good, that's what we want to have goals. We need to have a goal. If you don't wake up with a goal and a vision, you're going to be doing the same thing and just feel tired. Like, well, how can you get excited about life and turn your passion back on? When you take the wheat out, you'll find your passion because that makes you tired.
The
Wheat
wheat.
makes you tired.
The
Mhm.
wheat. Yeah.
Makes you
Well,
tired.
cracky. Yeah. I mean, it's a relatively simple message. And then, but you can go down different rabbit holes within that message. But yeah, I mean, you look great and you feel great. And quite frankly, in my humble opinion, there's not enough people on this planet looking and feeling great.
Oh my gosh. I went for a walk the other day and there was a yard sale. And this lady, she's got to be my age, but she looked so haggard. All of her teeth were falling out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what happened to her? And it was startling. And I'm like, that is just, it's unfortunate that that happens, but we do have control of how we want to look and how we want to feel. And so a lot of the times I would just take a notepad, write down what I'm doing because that helped me stay focused and on track. And I was always looking at my goals. And the one thing that really made the biggest difference was getting outside and going on vacation outside in nature to national parks, just get out and walk, having those health adventures, I call them. Get out and get nature, get the sunlight, get the grounding. I lost 20 pounds when I tuned all of that in.
Amazing.
That is huge because
Yeah.
we have to relax our nervous system. And so when you do that and you plug into the earth and get that energy, you disperse your inflammation and you'll feel better. When you feel better, you're more in tune with choosing to not eat the sugar. We have to get our body, how can we get our body feeling better so we could say no to the things that make us feel good in the moment? And
Amazing.
so, yeah, so I use sunlight and grounding. I'm always barefoot, but it's just getting out into nature and getting that sunlight is really powerful.
Agreed. Agreed. Oh, goodness me. Laurie, you're so inspiring. Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you so much. I'm so
So
excited.
happy.
This really lights me up.
It's look, yes, we can tell. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, my website is Lori Baloo, LoriBalue.com. And I am on Instagram at Lori Baloo Weight Loss, as well as my YouTube station, Lori Baloo Weight Loss, for the holistic weight loss and diabetes solution for women over 50. And hang out with me there. I'm putting a new video out every week that's going to really help inspire and motivate you because my certainty and conviction and the accountability that you'll get from me, that's priceless. Because if you could turn your desire to have health back on, then you can actually stop the diabetes process because it starts with the insulin resistance and the sugar, and it will go to Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. And so we want to reverse all of that before it happens. And you've got to stop the sugar to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen. Thank you so much, Laurie.
You're welcome. It was
Pleasure.
awesome to meet you and talk with you today, to
Thank you.
share with your audience.
Wow, that is an information packed conversation with Laurie there. And even though she gave a ton of really fascinating information, the takeaway is relatively simple: cut sugar and eat more unprocessed sources of proteins and fats. In other words, real foods for the win. But as Laurie mentioned, just changing what you eat often isn't enough. And the real challenge is changing how you think. How you think about sugar, how you think about food, and how you think about yourself and your relationship with sugar. And I get that this may be much easier said than done, which is why I created my 90-day program, the Freedom from Cravings Formula. It's a program that's specifically designed for women over 50 who want to get rid of cravings and feel more in control around food, especially sugar and comfort foods. In the program, you'll get step-by-step guidance and customized support through the 5-step formula that I've developed to help you get control over cravings so that you can finally live your life with more energy and fit into your favorite clothes effortlessly and feel confident in your food choices so that you can ditch the shame and embarrassment that you feel every time your emotions make you slip or fall off the wagon, and so that you never feel like you're on some kind of a restrictive diet. If you're at the stage of your life where you're finally ready to look after yourself, let's chat. You can hop on a free clarity call with me at any time by going to aftersugarclub.com and clicking on the big green button, Schedule a Clarity Call. We'll have a quick 30-minute one-on-one chat to see if the Freedom from Cravings Formula 90-day program is a good fit for you. So go to aftersugarclub.com. Speak soon. That's it for this week. Keep in touch and see you soon for another episode.